I'm Evan Smith. I'm editor-in-chief and CEO of the Texas Tribune. On behalf of the Tribune and the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas at Austin and Professor Jim Henson, who is our partner on this, I want to welcome you to this program of panel discussions that will be a big debrief of the 2012 election, tied directly into a preview of the 2013 legislative session. Yes, it is almost here, the best free entertainment going when the Capitol rolls back into town. We look forward to it very eagerly, and we know that to some degree what will happen from January to May of next year will be driven by what we just saw happen on Tuesday. And if you think that 2012 elections and 2013 session don't augur something for the 2014 elections and the 2016 elections, well, you're not really paying enough attention. And we'll try to help you link all those things together end to end today. I want to tell you first and foremost that we are here for the second election cycle with the Politics Project, a very great partner of the Tribune's. The University of Texas Texas Tribune poll is effectively managed out of the Texas Politics Project, and Jim Henson and his partner in crime, Darren Shaw, who you may have seen in a small cameo role when Karl Rove was mad at the decision desk on Fox the other night. Darren Shaw was in a corner there trying to avoid being on camera. Darren and Jim have done the Texas Tribune, University of Texas poll for 3 years now. We're very pleased to be in partnership with them. Some of you I know were at the Kirk Watson, Dan Patrick conversation. No tension at all between those two today. And no disagreement at all on issues. Over at the Austin Club, let me tell you about a couple of Austin Club events that we'll be doing in the weeks coming up. Whether you are a regular attendee of those events or not, we welcome you to those events. Next Thursday morning, November 15th, we have State Representative Brian Hughes of Mineola, a declared candidate for Texas Speaker. These are all at the Austin Club. They're all 7:30 doors, 8 o'clock conversation. And you can RSVP on the Tribune's website. On the 19th, Monday, 1 week from Monday, 3 incoming members of the Texas House, Cecil Bell Jr., Mary Gonzalez, and Giovanni Capriglione together as part of our Meet the New Guys series. On December the 6th, we have Chairman of the Senate Higher Education Committee, Kel Seliger, at the Austin Club. And then the following week, on December 13th, Barry Smitherman, the Chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission. Welcome at all of those. Please silence your phones completely, although if you elect to tweet and you can somehow get on the internet here in the Fortress, we ask that you use the hashtag TribLive as we are collecting those tweets in a feed and a stream, and we may very well storify the tweets later today on our site. This conversation, like the others today, will last for about 60 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions with the audience. We may end up going a little bit shorter on the conversation among the 5 of us and longer on the Q&A, depending upon how it goes. But please think up good questions. We'd love to bring you into the conversation later. The entire thing is, of course, being videotaped, this panel and the panels later today. All of that video will be available on the Tribune site and I think on the Politics Project site as well. By the way, if you're not aware, if you've not received one of these, later this afternoon, my pal Jim Henson will be moderating 2 panels. At 1 o'clock, a panel on policy issues in the next session featuring former Education Commissioner Robert Scott, former Transportation Commission Chairwoman Deirdre DeLisi, former Health and Human Services Executive Commissioner Albert Hawkins, and former LCRA General Manager Tom Mason on education, transportation, health, and water. 4 big-ticket issues in the next session. And then finally, the last thing that you want to hear, I'm sure, reporters gassing on. At 2:30 today, Jim will moderate a panel. Tim Eaton of the American Statesman, Ross Ramsey of the Tribune, Patty Hart of the Houston Chronicle, and Gromer Jeffers of the Dallas Morning News. And we welcome you to come back after lunch for all of those. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists, 4 distinguished consultants, political thinkers, people who played a significant role in the way so many of the races on the ballot this cycle played out. And I think they'll not only talk about what happened and why, but I think they will also be asked to look ahead, they know, and try to predict what it means for Texas, not just in the next session, but politically and beyond. To my immediate left is Jordan Berry, one of the big stars of this last election cycle, who managed the successful state House campaigns of Brian Hughes, Charles Perry, Scott Sanford, David Simpson, Drew Springer, James White, and Bill Zedler this session. I think his record we determined was 8-2. 8-2, which in baseball and other sports is pretty good. Only in the case of Jim Lantroop and in the primary and David Pineda in the general did Jordan come out on the losing side. The founder and principal of 5-year-old Berry Communications, he offices out of the Starbucks at 10th and Congress, or at least that's how it seems to me. He began his career as an intern at the Capitol in 2003 and served as vice chair of the College Republicans at Texas State University, where he earned undergraduate and master's degrees. On his left is Carolyn Boyle, who is the volunteer chair of the Texas Parent PAC, which says it had its best election cycle ever in 2012, endorsing 8 incumbent state lawmakers who won on Tuesday, along with 19 legislators, including Wendy Davis, J.D. Sheffield, Philip Cortez, and Chris Patty. Only 9 challengers the PAC endorsed lost. Ms. Boyle is a veteran education advocate and activist, having served as a PTA leader in the Austin Independent School District and a coordinator of the Coalition for Public Schools, an anti-voucher group. A former staffer in the Communications and Marketing Department of the Texas Education Agency, Ms. Boyle has undergraduate and master's degrees in journalism from the University of Texas at Austin. On her left is Ed Espinosa, a longtime Democratic consultant who produced Direct Mail this year for State Representative-elect Mary Gonzalez of El Paso and U.S. Representative-elect Joaquin Castro of San Antonio, as well as the successful Proposition 1 initiative here at the medical school, which passed with nearly 55% of the vote. He also ran Nick Lamson's unsuccessful campaign for Congress. In a career in politics spanning 20 years, he has also served as the Western States Political Director for the Democratic National Committee, and I think very relevant to the discussion we're going to have today, helped coordinate Latino mobilization and outreach for Harry Reid's and Michael Bennett's Senate campaigns. Ed has an undergraduate degree from UCLA and studied as well at the London School of Economics. Finally, Jason Johnson, who was chief strategist of Ted Cruz's campaign for the U.S. Senate. We have a pinup of Jason's likeness above Jay Root's desk in our office. As the chief strategist of the Cruz campaign, Jason is thus credited, fairly or not, for masterminding his headline-making, earth-shaking victory over David Dewhurst in the Republican primary. As chief he formerly served as chief of staff to Attorney General Greg Abbott, who will perhaps avail himself of Jason's services in a governor's race at some point. I suspect your rates will have gone up by then. And as communications director for then State Senator Todd Staples, please join me in welcoming Jordan Berry, Carolyn Boyle, Ed Espinosa, and Jason Johnson. Let me begin by asking each of you, beginning with Jordan, and we'll go down the panel, to characterize this election cycle. It is easy for some people at the national level to talk about what happened with the presidential race, very close race, that the president built what Ron Brownstein calls a coalition of the ascendant, Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, young people, gays and lesbians, to carry him over the line in many states that, quite frankly, I and a lot of people in this room suspected the president might have a problem winning. But in Texas, it was not a terribly competitive cycle. The Cruz-Dewhurst fight in the the Republican primary, the Davis-Shelton race in the Texas Senate, the Gallego-Canseco congressional race notwithstanding, we're pretty much where we started. So, Jordan, try to do your best at making this exciting and characterize what happened in Texas this cycle.
I think overall, the conservative movement in Texas clearly won, and the primary kind of set that in stone. We saw plenty of seats where folks were either paired, or you had conservative challengers, or anything else like that, even moderates challenging conservatives, and the conservatives clearly came out on top. I think as a movement, we were organized. We felt good about it. It's something that we knew that had to happen. We had to draw a line in the sand, and we got out and did it. Yep. Nationally, I mean, I'm severely depressed. There's a lot of soul searching, and I think also as a movement, we have to go to the mountaintop, and we have to remind ourselves what was our argument, and where did we fail on that. Right. And I think that that's not going to happen overnight. We have to really sit down and have that discussion.
We'll come around to the presidential, and I promise you we'll talk about that. But with regard to Texas, you say conservatives did well at beating back challenges from moderates, did well at essentially, you didn't say this, but I'll put these words in your mouth, reaffirming the victories that you made, the gains you made in 2010.
Exactly. I mean, specifically, you have Charles Perry, where he took on Delwyn Jones and he won. Delwyn came back, he did it again, even a bigger margin. David Simpson took on Tommy Merritt. Tommy Merritt came back. David did it again, and we did it by a bigger margin.
So the fact that the Democrats, to some degree here, if they have anything to crow about, are crowing about being +7 relative to the party breakdown in the House, what has been the case now going into next session, it'll be 95-55. Do you think the Democrats are wrong to think that that's a victory for themselves?
Well, I mean, you have to start somewhere, and if they can continue to chip away, we have seen this before, where they chipped away, and the next thing we knew, it was a tight house. Yeah. So, you know, I certainly don't mind of them realizing that they did something. And there were seats that we went after. David Pineda was a good example that we couldn't get.
Had been a Republican seat before, and now will go Democratic.
Correct.
Yeah. Carolyn, the parent PAC obviously supported a bunch of the moderate candidates, what used to be called moderate before that became a cuss word in Texas. You all supported many of the moderate candidates to whom Jordan referred. You won a bunch of races, lost some races, but I'm interested to know whether you characterize the cycle the same way that Jordan does.
Do you think I could kind of counter a comment? It was like early on you said that it truly wasn't a very competitive cycle.
Yes, please attack me. I'm great. I'm great with that. Honestly,
yeah,
it's no problem.
I'm still kind of stuck on that comment that it wasn't a competitive cycle. It was very competitive because there were so many seats open. You know, there were many, many open seats, and really good people chose to be candidates. And because there were so many seats, so many people talking, you know, it was a real conversation in Texas. And there was so much discussion about public schools and public education.
Which I know is a huge issue for your group.
Yes, and so it was really good for the people of Texas that there was so much discussion about public education. And it was because the cycle was very competitive. There were so many people choosing to be
Carolyn, by the
candidates.
time you got down to the general election, when you had more than 200 races on the ballot, there were probably about a dozen that were truly competitive party to party. Most of that you're referring to happened in the primary.
No,
right?
No, there were just tons of extremely competitive people, you know, that were campaigning very hard. And it was interesting talking with the candidates. So many of the candidates did a lot of canvassing and truly learned what the people care about. And everybody told me public education is the top topic, and it came about because of this competitive cycle.
Okay. Ed, you obviously were involved in a race that we all thought if there was going to be another congressional race that would be competitive other than Canseco and Gallego, it would be Lamson and Weber. It turned out not to be as competitive as all that.
Yeah, it was a heartbreak loss. But if 2010 was a wave election, you could say that 2012 was a bit more competitive. Maybe not statewide, but the difference between the 1994 wave and the 2010 wave is that the 2010 wave was right before a redistricting year. Now, there weren't that many competitive races this year because the system has been gamed to benefit the party of power. Now, no doubt, Texas is a conservative state. And we're going to see about a 60% mark for Republicans in some years. But by that same, but on the other hand, you should see 40% Democratic representation. We don't see that. And with the lines the way they are, we can't see that. So in the places where we can pick and choose those battles, we can fund candidates. We have good candidates. We have good structure. Gallego is a good example of that. Look, there were 2 competitive congressional races, and we split on those races. Yeah. There was 1 competitive Senate race, and the Democrats won it. And the Democrats didn't lose a single seat in the House. So in those places where we could compete, we did compete. But we still have some work to do. Now, in the Senate race, you know, the issue we had there is that everybody thought that Dewhurst was going to be the nominee. And
well, not everybody. You'll look to your left in a second. But accept the premise.
Would be the nominee. And when you see someone who has that type of name recognition and those relationships, but more importantly, that type of funding, it's tough to draw any candidates in that race who are willing to go up against that. So Cruz was successful in managing that through the primary, but we weren't equipped to be able to compete with that in the general.
Can I challenge that before I go to Jason? You know, the old line from the poker tables in Las Vegas, you cannot win if you do not play, seems operative here. The Democrats chose not to run serious candidates or any candidates in a stunning number of races in this cycle. You know, the Lamson and the Gallego examples, I think, are the exception that prove the rule, that when you recruit good candidates, you are potentially competitive. And again, you split that. But look, Lamson was a good candidate, regardless of how he ended up. But in a lot of these races, in a lot of the congressional races, in a lot of the legislative races, and in the U.S. Senate race, the Democrats did not do an especially good job of candidate recruitment. And I wonder if you would speak to that as it relates to whether the Democrats are going to truly be competitive in the next couple of cycles.
The work we have to do is more than cycle to cycle. Realize the Republicans in Texas have a decades, at least, maybe 2 decades worth of organizing an infrastructure. We have to build that almost every cycle. And until we can get to a point, you have to have 3 things to run a successful campaign. You have to have a good candidate, You have to have good funding, and you have to have good structure. It's like a stool with 3 legs. If you don't have one of those elements, then the stool doesn't stand. But it's a chicken and an egg argument.
Right.
Which one comes first?
Candidates say, I can't run if I don't have the money, but you can't get the money if you don't have a good candidate.
Right. So ideally, a self-funder who's got organization around the state would be a great place to start.
Right. Michael Watts for U.S. Senate would be the, Jason, watch out for that, 2018. It would be a dream maybe for you, right. Okay, so speak to me, Jason, about the success that you all had in defeating Governor Dewhurst, which really, up until March, April, to a lot of people looked like it was never going to happen.
Sure. I think the takeaway from the Cruz primary and runoff campaign, wherein conventional wisdom, I suppose we could say, was defeated, is also the same as, by and large, what we saw on the national level. And here's what I mean. Money still matters, obviously. It is one of the 3 stools of the leg. But by and large, and I would say starting with our Senate campaign, up and down the ballot, the reality, and I think this is a very positive, this is a very healthy thing for our republic, the quality candidates who could best make the argument and who were willing to communicate with the voters, with money, without money, anywhere in between, those who won the arguments, by and large, won their elections.
Yeah, regardless of whether they had a disadvantage on resources.
You look at the presidential race, I don't know what the count is, but how much money was spent by the super PACs? I mean, I think at the end of the day that, you know, if you look at all of the Republican money spent behind the presidential, Romney may have, and I haven't caught up on the numbers, probably had a funding advantage. It really didn't make a difference. President Obama made the better argument, was the better communicator.
Was that it, Jason, or was it the case in the presidential race, as in the Senate case, where the challenger who was ultimately defeated was someone who was viewed as insufficiently conservative, fairly or not? I mean, I think that there are interesting similarities between Governor Dewhurst and Governor Romney.
I'll let you.
In that the attacks against them were very similar. What you heard about one, you often heard about the other, and that maybe there was not enthusiasm on in the part of the party that is most energized right now for their candidates.
Well, I've seen that. You probably know the exact number, but I think I've seen that 3 million fewer Republicans turned out and voted, and if that's the case, that's certainly something to follow up and study on. But
right.
I'm not going to sit in judgment of how conservative Mitt Romney is or isn't. But what I can say is that he did not make the argument. He did not convince a lot of folks based upon their definition of what is conservative, which I think is a real question go forward. What is conservatism and what does it mean in the year 2012 and forward? But he simply did not make the argument. The money, without question, sustained him with the way the Republican presidential primaries were set up, and he made it through. But at the end of the day, moving past that, even assumed there was some of that Republican enthusiasm, the reality is, with one exception in that first debate, that the chief communicator for the Republican ticket was a B-, next to one of the greatest communicators that I believe we can all agree we've seen in the history of American politics.
Is there a lesson for Texas, as I'll stay with you for a second here on this, a lesson for the Republican Party or a lesson for Texas with regard to the Cruz candidacy beyond the idea that the guy with the better message or the one who can articulate it better is going to win?
Well, I still think that's a piece of it, but yes, but I want to say why. Those are probably where we'll head.
Yeah.
We have some very serious challenges, not just at the federal level, but as Carol knows, at the state level. And there are no easy answers. There are no easy solutions. Some of it's not cut and dry. There aren't binary choices. And that's going to require that both sides have the ability to truly communicate with their constituents and truly have a discussion about what are the policy options that are on the table outside the typical labels of that's a simple liberal idea, that's a simple conservative idea. And therefore, I truly do believe that the quality of the candidate, the quality of the office holder, the willingness of the office holder, which, by the way, I think this is a big piece of what has motivated the Tea Party, the willingness of the office holder to have an actual dialogue about what it is they're considering. Not assuming that because I have the title of senator or state representative or governor or lieutenant governor, I just know, and I'll make that decision, and then I'll package my commercials and I'll package my press conference, and you guys will just be happy with it.
So Senator Cruz is planning on working with Democrats and compromising?
Without question, I will give you his quote exactly. I'm not speaking on behalf of him, but I'm sure you've heard him say that his position on compromise is no different than President Reagan's. What do? When you're offered half a loaf, you take it and you go back to more. And recently, I believe on election night and in a couple of interviews the day after the election, he sincerely said that if the president means what he said in his victory speech, he's excited and absolutely willing to work with him. We're beyond the point of who gets political credit at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Ed would argue that, well, Republicans are in trouble anyway because of demographic shifts. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah,
Let's assume that's true. These problems are sufficiently critical such that we have to move forward with some solutions. And President Obama can't run again. I, for one, don't care how much credit he gets. We need to solve some problems, and that is going to take working with Republicans, Democrats, and Independents.
Jordan, let me ask you to pick up on something Jason said about the Republican Party and the degree to which there's a war going on within the Republican Party. The Republican Party is going to have a conversation with itself about what face it wants to put forward going down the road. Do you think that there's an issue here where some of the defeats that you all sustained at the national level particularly were a reflection of how that war is keeping you from winning? The Tea Party candidates who maybe beat establishment candidates in Missouri, Indiana, I know those were extreme cases for the obvious reason, but as in the cycle previously, Sharon Angle, Ken Buck, the woman in Delaware, Christine O'Donnell. Democrats won Senate races in North Dakota and Montana that I suspect a lot of people thought going into Election Day were going to be real stretches for them. Is this a manifestation of the Republican Party at war with itself?
I think it's a multifaceted answer. First of all, the Republican Party just isn't this party that everybody signs up because they all agree to 10 points. People join the Republican Party for different reasons. I was raised a Democrat my whole life in East Texas. I was initially attracted to social issues. I stuck around because of the fiscal issues, even more so, once I learned that debate. But I think it depends on regional, and the Republican Party certainly much stronger in certain parts of Texas versus the urbans where we're slipping away. But I mean, when it comes to like the Indiana race or the Missouri race, doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you're going out making stupid comments and then you're doubling down on them, you're going to lose. And those guys certainly made stupid comments, and they had no clue how to back away. I mean, the idea that you can look at a female and tell her, well, if you were raped, that was your plan. It's all playing out according to plan. I mean, if you're going to do that, it doesn't matter what party you're in, you're going to go down in flames.
So the conservative wing of the party right now would like to have Dick Lugar back if they could build a time machine. They'd like to put Dick Lugar back in the Senate if they could.
Well, look, I have no regrets of standing on principle and going and taking people out in the Republican Party because they're not doing what they were put in to do.
Yeah.
And so I have no regrets that they elected a more conservative person to put in the primary, in the primary for the general election. But they just fumbled the ball later down in the day.
And in Texas, your side seems to be winning that fight anyway. Conservatives are winning.
I think we're winning the fight. And the thing I'm most proud of is when I came on in 2003 and started interning and volunteering for campaigns, is I said, well, wow, this is such a small turnout, 6,000 voters for the Republican primary, and there's really no general election. Why aren't we expanding the playing field? And I kept hearing, you can't expand the playing field. The people who are going to show up, they're already showing up. And just from my experience as a child in East Texas, I knew that there were certain people who were never being communicated with about the arguments. And one thing that I'm really proud to see is just that we've expanded the number of people who show up in the Republican primary. And I feel like nearly every race I get involved in, we figure out a way. We broke some records 2 years ago, and we did well this year in the primary. But we're continuing to reach out, we're continuing to build coalitions, and we're making sure that our message is being heard.
Ed, on the flip side of that for the Democrats is the robust Latino turnout during this cycle. President won 71%. That's the statistic I've seen, is 71% of the Latino vote nationally. Other than President Clinton in '96, that's far and away the highest percentage of the Latino vote that a Democratic candidate for president has won. Governor Romney, I think, was at 27%, down from Senator McCain at 31%, down from George W. Bush at 40%. If there's, there may be many things that you take away that are positive from the overall campaign this cycle, but one seems to be that the Hispanic community is with you all and not with the Republicans, and to the degree that it's growing, that may give you some optimism even in a place like Texas.
Well, absolutely. And when you communicate with the Latino community, the voters will show up.
So again, the flip side of what Jordan said about communicating with conservatives who might not have turned out before. You're making inroads and getting people to turn out.
Well, that's right. And this is part of the hurdle that we see in Texas. People always talk about the sleeping giant and that one day it's going to wake up and it's going to vote in numbers. But it's only going to wake up if somebody pokes at it and somebody stirs it and there's an organization and a candidate and a financing structure to actually facilitate that. We saw that in the 23rd Congressional District, and the results went our way. We saw that in Nevada. We've seen it in California for years.
Of course, in the 23rd, Ed, you had 2 Hispanic candidates. You had a Hispanic Republican and a Hispanic Democrat.
You did, but the issue that I'm getting to is that it's not always about, sometimes it goes bigger than that, and it goes down to brand. Because when it comes to what is it Latinos care about? I have people say to me, hey, we want to put together a soccer team, and we're gonna do an event with a piñata, and I'm like, come on. All right, we care about the same things that everybody else cares about. Economy, education, better way of life, strong future. But it's the tone that makes a difference in how people react. You can say, you can be with people on the same issues all the time, but if your rhetoric is perceived as hostile, if your candidates come across as ones that just don't connect with the community, then that's going to be a problem. And if you have another candidate who is not only identifying more with the community, but engaging them to participate in the electoral process and has the ability to do that, then it's going to make gains. And I think that the 23rd is a good example of that.
And so you're hopeful as the population of Texas hurdles inexorably toward majority status, that it's not overstated, you think, to say that that's going to benefit Democrats in the end?
It's not overstated, but it won't happen by itself. And we, again, it's those 3 things we keep having to come back to. We have to have a good candidate with a good structure that is funded. And if we have those 3 things, then it will come along. It's not easy. There's no silver bullet, right? There's no one solution to it.
Right. Carolyn, the issue of education that you have been so active in promoting is not really a partisan issue, right? This is one where Democrats and Republicans see the world in a similar way. And of course, coming out of the last session with the cuts to public education that were sustained, a lot of people thought that would be the big rallying cry. If one issue was going to be a driver in this election cycle, they thought it would be that. How do you see that issue playing out going into the next session, coming out of this election, going into the next session?
So I do think that it's good that so many candidates talked about public ed as a part of the campaigns, and it truly was a top issue all over Texas. And fortunately, parents really spoke up. You know, the parents of children in public schools were angry. Cutting $5.4 billion last year was a terrible action. So I do think on the campaign trail, so many of these winning candidates, whether they were liberal, conservative, moderate, heard from those parents and probably will be coming with marching orders. Take care of our kids, take care of our public schools. It's the key for job creation and prosperity in Texas to have good schools.
But of course, we had rallies at the Capitol during the last session, 20,000 or more people come march on the Capitol in support of public education, but it didn't seem, to my eyes at least, that policy inside the building was impacted as much as you all hoped it would be by those numbers coming together.
Some places it was a really big issue, you know, in terms of protecting a real advocate like Wendy Davis. You know, that was it was the top issue in that campaign.
Do you think education was what saved her?
Yes. I mean, it was extremely important. People just rallied. The parents rallied to support Wendy. And there also were just a number of key, truly competitive races where a person who was perceived as being anti-public schools lost. People like John Garza, Sid Miller. You know, there were a number of very important races that the public school supporters came together and kicked out a person.
Jason, I wonder if you would comment on the Davis race. You and I had an exchange this morning by email in which you reminded me that you'd actually worked on some of Mark Shelton's campaigns previously. Do you think, as Ms. Boyle does, that education is what carried Wendy Davis over the line?
I don't know much about Senator Davis's campaign or race, but I think it's a safe assumption that the role that she played in the education debate would have certainly helped to motivate her natural base and constituency, and that's a very important part of a campaign. However, I think, and I give this very important disclosure and caveat, I have not kept up very specifically with the state legislative races district by district. However, I think it is true that with regard to Senate District 10, that she ran essentially in the district that she drew with the court-imposed map. And I think that the real lesson across the legislative races is essentially when you look at how those districts were drawn, the Republicans won the Republican districts and the Democrats won the Democratic districts.
Of course, Jason, I'll very politely push back on you and point out that in that district, she had no Libertarian this time to take votes away from the Republican as she did 4 years ago. President did significantly worse in Tarrant County and in that district specifically than he did 4 years ago.
Certainly.
And she was running against somebody from
4 years ago.
Well, she was running against somebody from Fort Worth as opposed to somebody from Arlington. You know, she actually had many more reasons to lose this time. And yet, even though this was her district or the district that they drew,
I think the numbers certainly benefited her. However, it was conventional wisdom in this town that she should be defeated.
She would probably be defeated.
And again, I didn't follow the campaign closely, but again, just from the outside, and I certainly don't like it when people come in after her with the benefit of hindsight is 20/20 and throw the bombs. But again, as a side-by-side comparison, simply the commercials I saw posted on y'all's website, et cetera, it certainly looks like Senator Davis ran an excellent campaign.
Ran a better campaign.
She ran a better campaign, and she was a very attractive candidate and an articulate office holder.
Come back around, Jason, to what Ed said. Obviously, one of the reasons that Senator Cruz has gotten so much attention, if he were Senator Schwartz coming from Texas, I'd suspect he might not have gotten as much attention. But there was a lot of discussion of the fact that he has Hispanic origin, you know, Cuban American. At a time when the Republicans, as we said, have had some challenges within the Hispanic community, and especially in Texas, where the old Xavier Rodriguez rule or the Victor Carrillo rule was said to be in effect, that Hispanics couldn't win a Republican primary, overstated, of course, but there was some germ in history that maybe spoke to the challenges that Republican Hispanics had. Is he now going to be the flag carrier for Republicans among Hispanics, and does his success maybe give you some counterpoint of view to what Ed said about the challenges of ethnicity in part?
First and foremost, he's going to be the flag carrier for any and everyone who truly wants to tackle this debt and deficit that we have.
He will be a senator who happens to be Hispanic as opposed to a Hispanic senator in that respect.
There's no doubt that the population demographic trends that we see not only in Texas, around the country, but especially in Texas, are very important to the future of politics. But frankly, that's a side note, it is who we are. I'm, as we discussed a little before this panel, you know, I for one am very careful about offering up these simple labels and characterizations about what is, quote, the Hispanic community.
Yeah, it's not any more monolithic than the Anglo community.
It honestly isn't. And Ed made a comment a moment ago about the parties and however you characterized it, and he followed by, we care about X, Y, and Z. And I found it very interesting. We did do a little survey research, and when you ask the open-ended question of likely general election voters of what's the most important issue to you, there was essentially no difference based upon ethnicity. And by the way, immigration hardly even registered, either with likely Hispanic voters or likely general election voters, regardless of ethnicity. It was jobs, lack of jobs, economy. But yes, I mean, it's recognized. I won't challenge your characterization too much, though I do believe that now Senator-elect Cruz would probably still get some attention, given the fact that it was a perceived huge upset in the state of Texas against the then perceived establishment.
Well, and you're right. We care about the same issues, but it's the way that the parties are branded within a certain community. The interesting thing about Ted Cruz is you're also right. He didn't run as a Latino candidate. He ran as a conservative Republican, and that's what really elevated him past Dewhurst. Unlike, say, Marco Rubio, for example, who also ran as a conservative candidate, but had a much stronger connection to the Cuban American community in Florida and showed up to Washington as a conservative Republican, but somebody who's also well known among Hispanics, Latinos in political circles. Cruz is probably would probably benefit if he developed more of a relationship there, but I suspect that he will over the next 6 years.
Organically.
But let us not, you mentioned the Xavier Rodriguez example, and so obviously stating the obvious, it is a fact that, quote, the Tea Party in the state of Texas did in fact elect the first Hispanic senator from the state of Texas. And so there's no question about whether or not Republicans or conservatives, place some, they will vote for the candidate regardless of the color of their skin. There is a legitimate question go forward about that branding that Ed mentions, and is whether or not, regardless of the part, your party, or if your last name is Hispanic or Latino or Anglo, whether or not Republicans and Democrats will be able to compete competitively amongst that community when it comes to votes.
Jordan.
I've just been a few years younger. I just have a little different perspective, and I think there are other things that are going on.
Not that much younger.
That's right. Not than Jason. There are other things that are going on that I don't even think the folks older than me get, but my generation sees, and it's just a fact. The Hispanics are assimilating so quick in our culture. I don't think that they're going to view themselves as necessarily Hispanic or this or that. People, my generation, we're all marrying each other. I mean, the idea that we're just going to have this group of Hispanics over here, whites over here, blacks over here, folks, everyone's getting together. It's changing. And I think that it's going to continue to make people vote their values and not look at themselves as I'm a part of a racial group or a tribe. And I think that that's just wishful thinking on some Democrat organizers' parts, that Hispanics are going to continue to come here and their children and their grandchildren are going to view themselves as having much of any connection to Mexico more than I do to Ireland, except if a soccer game is on. And I just think that the changes are happening so quick, and that's something I'm personally looking forward to, is that my generation does not care, will not view themselves as that, and it's all going to change.
Let me roll this into the next session. So taking what we just talked about, so here's how we've characterized what the results are, what they mean. We have a session beginning in just a couple of months. I visited with Senator Watson and Senator Patrick at the Austin Club this morning and asked about whether, specifically on the issue of Latinos and Republicans, were Republicans talking about inclusiveness in a big tent, but then putting issues forward, whether it's voter ID, redistricting, sanctuary cities, in-state tuition. The many members, at least of the Texas Senate, are talking about kicking in-state tuition to the curb from a policy standpoint in the next session, whether it actually happens. Is there a disconnect between, on the one hand, the new inclusiveness of the Republican Party with regard to Hispanic candidates, and on the other hand, the legislation has been put forward? And Senator Patrick said, I actually think that a very big issue for Latinos in Texas is education. Obviously, as chair of public education, he'd say that. He said, I think that that's not an issue that is really related to ethnicity so much as just opportunity. Carolyn, let me start with you on that, because you're an education advocate. What do you think about that?
So in terms of just it being a top priority to parents in general, I mean, clearly the people of Texas want to have strong public schools. And it's really job one for the Texas legislature. And probably it should just kind of jump up as the top issue. And in the past week, I've been talking with a lot of parents about what's coming up. And what they're telling me is that it's important not to get distracted. Not to get distracted by privatization schemes and using public money for private school vouchers. You know, that the folks at the Capitol need to concentrate on strong public schools all over Texas.
Yeah. And so you're expecting to hit back against any plan for choice or vouchers that Senator Patrick or others may promote during the session? Truly,
because in Texas, I mean, clearly, you know, if you look at the children of Texas currently, it's about 94% of them all go to public schools. And job one is to be sure that every one of those schools is a great school. And it cannot be a great school if you're cutting, you know, huge amounts of money, $5.4 $1 billion.
Senator Patrick's argument, Ms. Boyle, is that some schools fail and parents shouldn't be locked into failing schools. They should have other options. You reject that.
Typically in Texas, schools can turn around very quickly. All it takes is a terrific principal, teachers who are really good, and no resources. And so, you know, in the past 10 years, we've proven with the Texas accountability system, a school can turn around very, very quickly.
Chase.
This is fascinating to me because I think that herein lies maybe a predictor for the Democrat Party. When we talk about, quote, blocks of voters, when we first started, I mentioned, you know, my belief and my experience, and part of the passion behind the Tea Party is, don't tell me what I believe. Don't tell me you're voting a certain way just because you have a title. Let's sit down and talk about accountability. And you let off this segment with voter ID, and now you're talking about school choice, or Carolyn's preferred term, vouchers. And it's very interesting. If you look at honest survey research in the state of Texas, and I've seen a lot of it on both of those issues, that on both issues, in the Hispanic community, in the partisan labeled Democrat, lower socioeconomic ladder, school choice has tremendous support among Democrats, among Hispanics, among Texans with income under $50,000, among Texans with income under $25,000. And voter ID, 70+% of Texans, regardless, slice it any way you want to slice it, support it. Yet, the political leaders, for whatever reason, use those issues as a rallying cry about partisanship and you're for schools, you're against schools, et cetera, and it's clearly successful. But there are two issues wherein I can show you where the leaders in Austin are out of step with their natural constituencies.
So your expectation, Jason, is that the push by Senator Patrick and possibly Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst and the governor, who's been quite vocal in his advocacy for choice, that's going to be a big issue in the next session?
I have no clue. I worked on some of those issues several years ago, and I would suggest that there is no more challenging, no more complicated, no more passion-infused issue, if you will, when the legislature is in session than education funding, and policy. And I would never try to predict what's going to happen.
Of the folks who you worked for, many of the conservatives who you elected, are these folks who are likely to be supportive of a school choice?
I think there's a major disconnect between the Austin education leaders and the local teachers in the districts that I've been to. And I'm known as a consultant who actually goes into the district. I attend several meetings. I just sit there and observe. I get on the ground and I talk to teachers. And I think David Simpson is a great example. David Simpson voted against the budget, gave a speech, wrote an op-ed. I did it because I did not like the budget cuts to education. I did not think they were fair. And then the education community from Austin goes after David Simpson in his campaign. And I would wave up and down and say, hold on, you're going after David, even though he voted against the budget because he says it's because of education cuts. He's gone to talk to the teachers, he stood with them, but you're still going after him. Why are you really going after him? How are you really going after him? He's clearly a good advocate, and like him, hate him, love him, whatever. You get him on your side on something, and rest assured you can sleep a little bit better because you know he's working on the issue. And for them to go after him, and I saw it with other people, with the education community in Austin wanted to go after Charles Perry, but he clearly had all the local teachers' support.
But, so are they likely, though, to support some move on choice in public ed, or are they, you know, because there's some discussion that this may be an issue on which Democrats and some rural Republicans actually have common ground. And even if it's not the case in the Senate, in the House at least, they may be able to stall or completely block an effort to get some voucher bill or a choice bill passed.
It's hard to say. I mean, I work for several different individuals who have different districts.
Different points of view.
Different points of view.
What are you hearing then?
It's hard to say, but I think conservatives in general do believe in not holding a kid hostage in an underperforming district. And they say, well, we can turn this school in 5 or 6, you know, we can turn around this school in 5 or 6 years. Okay, well, the kid's in 6th grade now. By then they will have graduated. We're just going to send them out into the world unprepared. I do not think that's fair to young children who only get one chance to get it right in public education.
No, so, and
Jason, quick, and then Ed.
Yeah, as you know, there has long been a debate, even within the conservative community, about school choice, and it falls on the lines, well, if with that voucher comes, you know, all of the regulation that comes from the state, aren't we? I mean, do we really get anywhere? So there is some divide within the conservatives.
Ed, where is education going to fit into the conversation we'll be having next year?
I mean, it's a huge issue. And if school choice is popular, it's because anything is going to be popular compared to what we've got right now. And if you can say we can hold a kid hostage in a bad district, but doesn't cutting off funding to that district keep that kid there and make the district even worse? I mean, that's a product of No Child Left Behind.
Not when there are rich white kids who are going to great schools 1 mile down the road. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to do that to certain children because you come from a certain neighborhood or your parents are stuck in a certain socioeconomic status to tell those kids, well, sorry, that's just how it's going to play out for you.
I don't even understand where you're going with that. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to cut education and complain that the system isn't working and then school choice is then popular, it's like you're forcing a choice, which then doesn't make it a choice. So that's part of the problem that we've got with public education. The other thing is the whole issue with standardized testing, which I'm careful about getting into because I don't have kids and I haven't had to take these standardized tests. But I know it's something else people don't like. I probably shouldn't have gone down that road.
Throw it out there.
Well, it is an issue that's likely to be on the table in the next session, given what seems to be quite significant opposition to it, again, cross-party. I want to ask each of you, as you look ahead, before I go beyond the session to the next election cycle and what the politics of this year tell us about what's coming, let me ask each of you to say what you think we'll be talking about in 4 or 5 months in the middle of that session, based on what we know about the composition of the House and Senate, based on what we know about the leadership coming out of this election cycle. What are we likely to be talking about as the big issues in the next legislative session? Ms. Boyle, of course, you're going to say education. I understand that. But what else do you see beyond that? What do you think is on the horizon for us?
So I do think probably talking about budget issues will be extremely important. I mean, because it will be a tight budget. Yeah. And there should be some discussion about sources of maybe some extra money. And
for instance?
Well, I mean, people talk about their problems with the Texas business tax. I mean, there really should be some discussion about that tax and how that impacted having a structural deficit.
Right.
And truly, coming to the Capitol and governing, it's a tough job. And there are some very tough topics that need to be addressed. And my hope and my prayer is that these candidates will come to Austin and tackle the tough topics, how to pay for, you know, a growing population in Texas and poverty. You know, I personally hope there's a lot more discussion about the poverty in Texas. And so I'm hoping that 4 months into this session, people will be talking about what's really important.
Jason, what do you think? Carolyn's talking about the question of revenue. Obviously, the governor, when he came back from the presidential campaign trail, put a flag down, said no new taxes, no increases on existing taxes, no accounting tricks. I believe he said no fees. I mean, he's basically said we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. So
I'm going to make a bold prediction: there will be no new taxes coming out of this legislative session. But I
You're
do think,
a smart man.
Yeah. I do think that Carolyn's correct when she mentioned funding. I mean, clearly, I mean the parts of the budget. That if you look at those pieces of the budget that enrollment growth, if you will, in schools, health and human services, I mean, what will that actual, going back, what will the emergency appropriations bill actually, be at the end of the day?
Right.
You know, I've seen the headlines that sales tax revenues have continued to increase.
Economy is getting better.
Economy's getting better, but at the end of the day, where do we end up with the budget when Health and Human Services is taken into effect? If in fact, I assume that the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, begins to be implemented. I think that's a safe assumption now. What does that mean fiscally for the state of Texas? In education, clearly,
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge.
Ed, on the Affordable Care Act, obviously, big discussion. One's already taken place, but will continue to take place about whether we should expand Medicaid, the opportunity to do so. The governor has so far said, and other state leaders have said, no, thank you. There are some local leaders in the counties who are trying to figure out if they can wire around the state and do it on their own. But obviously, this is an increasing portion of our budget, and we're going to have to figure that out. You expect that to be a big topic in the next
Well, yeah, in addition
session.
to education and the budget, which I expect, I agree, I think will also be huge issues. Let's not forget that redistricting is going to come back, and to the extent that that drags out, another big issue. But yes, healthcare, definitely a big issue. What will be interesting to see is, even though Perry has come out against the Affordable Care Act, let's see if he decides to take it the same way he came out against the stimulus, but decided to take stimulus funds to balance the budget in 2009. Be interesting to see how that plays out in this session, because they really could use the matching funds from the federal matching funds for health care. Prop 1, which just passed here in Austin, part of the motivation behind that was to capitalize on federal matching funds that are available now because of the Affordable Care Act. So it may not be something that happens right away, but I think it's definitely something that we see start to emerge in 2013.
And Jordan, you know, Ed's referring to the medical school proposition on the ballot here in Austin. Both here in Austin and in San Antonio, voters were given the opportunity, the great tradition of local control that we all talk about how much we love, given the opportunity to vote on whether they wanted to increase taxes to pay for things that they felt were important and that the state was not going to provide resources for. Both passed. I guess that's a good thing.
You
Right,
know,
to give people a chance.
I certainly believe in local control.
Right.
And let people be
People
in charge
wanna
of
go
their own
up,
destinies.
Up or down. So will you expect, as Jason does, this is going to be a very limited revenue, no new taxes, we're going to be very tight budget. That's going to be a defining aspect of the next session.
And I think that there's a lot of folks who were sent here with the mandate to do something about the margins tax. There's certainly...
You believe that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I would get out in communities, that's one thing I was surprised to hear so much about was business owners showing up to events who were very upset with the margins tax.
So the governor last session, after Senator Ogden, who I would still describe as no one's idea of a liberal, Senator Ogden was heard to be, calling for a tweaking of the margins tax. Both the governor and Chairman Pitts on the House side both said, if we do a redo of the margins tax, ultimately someone's taxes are going to go up. That's a tax increase. Therefore, this is a non-starter. So your folks, the folks who you worked with who are coming in, they will actually challenge the governor on whether or not we should do something with the margins tax.
And maybe not even my folks necessarily, but I think several members were sent here from across the state by small business owners who either want to see the exemption raised or something that they need change. It hit them pretty hard. I think that when it comes to Medicaid, as we were talking about Medicaid, there's certainly tons of fraud in the Medicaid budget. I think getting in there and cleaning that up. I mean, if the legislature wants to be responsible, depending on what part of the state you live in, water is a major issue. And it'd be interesting to see if they start to come up with more solutions for that.
$53 billion water plan, totally unfunded. Where do we get the money from?
No say.
Yeah. Well, you and everybody else say the same thing as far as that goes. Before we open it up for questions, what does this election cycle mean for the 2014 elections? We have the potential in the next election cycle to have status quo. Governor runs again, lieutenant governor runs again. All the ambition of the Republican Party, which has been pent up for more than a decade, remains pent up. Or we have the opportunity potentially to see both the governor or lieutenant governor not run again, and all of a sudden we have more open races on the ballot than at any time since 1990. I'd be interested to know what you all think about that. Jordan and Jason on the Republican side, and Carolyn and Ed on the Democratic side. Is there any hope at all of the Democrats being any more competitive statewide in 2014 than they've been in the last 20 years? Jason first, with regard to 2014.
Yes, I do think there is more hope, but when you hit rock bottom, you have two places to go: sideways and
up. Right.
But I do genuinely believe that there is more hope of it being competitive for Democrats in 2014, depending upon what happens with this pent-up example.
So what will happen? You think, the governor has said he's looking very hard at running. He hasn't said so definitively, Ken Armbruster notwithstanding. Lieutenant governor has said he's running again. So what do you think is really going to happen?
I think it totally depends upon their reactions, each of those elected officials' reactions to the challenges that they're facing coming into the session, how they interpret what happened in the Ted Cruz-David Dewhurst race, and how they govern, and how what is the motive behind their running for re-election? What actual vision are they going to articulate? I have no clue, obviously, who's going to do what, but what I do believe will happen is there will be an accountable primary process on the Republican side for statewide elected officials. The days of anointing just because you've been around longer and you have the name ID, I truly believe are over in the state of Texas. The only question, as you know, Evan's always been, well, in the state the size of Texas, wasn't a question, it was a statement. You just can't do it. Well, you can do it. You can't do it just by running against someone. You have to, again, articulate a vision. And those days are over.
You were Chief of Staff to General Abbott.
Yes, sir.
You believe General Abbott might challenge the governor in a primary?
I have no clue.
Would you want to see him challenge the governor in a primary?
I have no comment.
That was Ted DeLisi says, I occasionally pull the manhole cover away from the manhole and guide people into it. I was attempting to do that there. I want to say, very good for you for navigating around the manhole. What do you think about the Republicans in 2014?
I'm hopeful. I really am.
In what respect?
Like you said, the primary system is holding people accountable. I think it's healthy to have turnover when turnover is necessary. I'm not sure if it's necessary right now. It's going to be interesting to see who really is even up for the task after this legislative session.
Yep.
I mean, we saw a couple of first-timers this last year just pack up and go home.
Yep.
I know we have several ambitious House members who have been cashing away money. It's going to be interesting to see if they really think they stand a chance in the Republican primary statewide, or if they want to continue to move up to the House.
Is there a greater chance in 2014 on the Republican side of status quo relative to the past couple cycles, or lots of change?
I am planning on a total bloodbath. Really
You think it's going to be a bloodbath?
Yep. Because I think that folks are now looking at Cruz going, I'm in. And they're no longer, do I think...
Right, that the lesson of Ted Cruz is we can so challenge the establishment.
Well, and even more so, folks are no longer going to set aside going, well, I'm just going to wait for this to clear out, then I'll come in and, when I'm introduced. People are going to just show up and file, and they're going to be an aggressive primary system.
Ed, what do you think about 2014? Is there any reason to be more hopeful? Julian Castro was on Morning Joe today. I happened to hear him a little bit on that show, and he was asked specifically, do you think that the Democrats will be competitive in Texas anytime soon? And he said 6 to 8 years. He was even foreclosing on 2014. So should you follow the mayor's lead and say, well, Democrats should just not even bother in 2014? What do you think?
No, I don't think that we should in that sense. I mean, I respect the mayor, and I agree with him on most positions he takes, but 2 years is an eternity in politics. I mean, just ask Obama in 2008 and ask him if any Democrat if they could foresee what would happen in 2010. Or, for that matter, any Republican, what would happen in 2012. A lot can happen between now and then. But we've got good candidates. Mayor Castro is one of them. We have a couple of people in the state Senate. Who knows? Sometimes you have rising stars like Ted Cruz did, and they don't come out of the elected bodies that we have here. And I don't like to count us out. We have I like to say they're hurdles, they're not walls. But we still have challenges in front of us. But we have good candidates, we have good ideas, and if we have the money and the structure behind it, we can do it.
Few of the Democratic Nostradamuses, maybe that should be Nostradami more appropriately, have suggested that the Democratic candidate for governor in 2014 will be Wendy Davis. What do you think about that?
I like Wendy. I think she's really dynamic. I think she's got a lot of crossover appeal. I would love to see more women run for public office in Texas, whether they're Democrats or, well, mostly Democrats.
Carolyn, let me let you get the last word on 2014 before we open it up for questions.
Do you think I could speak for just people being a little more bipartisan? Texas Parent PAC is a bipartisan PAC. Sure. And so our PAC was formed in 2006, and during that time, we've supported so many wonderful candidates of both parties.
Right.
And it seems like at this point in time, what Texas really needs is good people coming forward. People who truly want to work hard for Texas, and
regardless of party.
Yes, and the people are out there. And it's important for all of us to go forth and try to talk good people into being good candidates.
So will Parent PAC endorse Governor Perry for re-election?
Fortunately, we keep out of the governor's race. We're just focusing on the legislature.
Man, I am trying, but I'm not getting there. All right, well, okay. Let you have that one then. Let me open it up for questions. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes at most, and just raise your hand, use your outside voice. We don't have a microphone to walk around the room, and we'll go. Oh, we do. Okay, well, you want to run directly to the opposite side of the room to Mr. Baer. Yes, sir.
So I understand from your perspective you were talking about as far as the Hispanics in Texas and, you know, possibly helping move this forward as far as demographics. The demographics are there. The message may be there. But the biggest problem has been the turnout. And, you know, while the rest of the nation, Hispanics are turning out in large amounts, in Texas it seems to be anemic. I mean, what's going, to your point, you were saying in 2 years, if Hispanics are not going to turn out, do you really still see 2 years, or what's it going to take to make that happen?
What will motivate greater Hispanic turnout, Ed?
Well, you've got to have a program, like any program, whether it's Hispanics or women or African Americans or young people or senior citizens, you have to have a program that has paid communications to that community. And when that community is engaged, they will then participate. We haven't been able to fund a program like that, and as such, we haven't been able to turn the vote out. Now, if we had more competitive districts drawn, such as the 23rd Congressional District, we would see that activity. But when we have safe districts that are drawn one way or the other, then you stifle a voter's ability to think that they can affect change. And if they think they can't affect change, they won't.
Gentleman over there.
I'll just use my outside voice.
Thank you.
You touched on this at the very beginning. In 2010, 2012, we saw in very red states Tea Party candidates lose. Do you think Texas is just more conservative than a Montana or North Dakota, or is it that we're not challenging the candidates to the point where they sometimes say a personal belief that suddenly paints them, that causes them to lose the election? And this is where you have to play to win. You were talking at the very beginning how the Democrats just aren't even fielding a bunch of candidates.
Jason, I don't think Ted Cruz held back at all. Do you, during the primary?
No, it doesn't seem to be as
Yeah. What to the questioner's point, what is it that makes Texas, different from other states in which Tea Party candidates have had a harder time in the fall than they have had here?
Well, first of all, 50% of likely general election voters in Texas, again, regardless of how you want to slice them, do self-identify as conservative. 32% moderate and 16% liberal. I would suggest that the thinking and the history and that informs people to self-identify in that way is part of the unique character of Texas, and frankly is one of the reasons that Texans one of the beacons economically in the country.
So our baseline is just a couple clicks to the right of a lot of other places.
If you want to call it that, I mean, I don't know if it's right or left. I think this term conservative means something so different to so many people. I think I know what it means in Texas. And if you want to say it's to the right because the other is liberal, without question.
Okay, we'll use the mic for the tape, I'm told. Sir?
So, as a follow-up question, I wonder if some of y'all, and Jason, you may have some perspective on some of the national candidates as well, of these strong Tea Party candidates, because I'm sorry, is it Ed that you mentioned earlier that you have to have the three legs? One of those is a strong candidate. So when you look at Christine O'Donnell or Sharon Angle or Todd Akin, who made just phenomenal mistakes in their campaigns, so Sharon Angle's was a storybook disaster of a campaign. So is it really the message, or is it the messenger that's losing in some of those states? And where we have a strong candidate, is that message winning, essentially, even in battleground states?
So your question is it the messenger or the messenger? I think as any good political consultant will tell you, depending on your budget, the answer is it depends.
I thought you were going to say it was the consultant.
We're only responsible for the victories.
Yeah.
But it does depend. And with situations like Christine O'Donnell and Sharon Angle, you have a couple of things at play here. You either have, and Todd Akin for that matter, you either have a low turnout primary where your purists may elect somebody that's not palatable in the general election, or you have the other candidate playing in that primary. In the Missouri case, McCaskill, her allies ran ads supporting Todd Akin to choose her candidate. It's not entirely uncommon. So I think that low turnout primaries really can bring out purists, and we see it on our side of the aisle. You can say that Ted Cruz benefited from that. The difference is that the voting population in Texas is more receptive to conservative messages. Now, I would clarify that the Texas population is different than the voting Texas population. And we have ways to catch up on that, and a lot of that depends on the population catching up with the voting population.
I don't think the Ted Cruz primary was low.
Say again?
Go ahead.
I don't think the Ted Cruz primary was a low turnout.
Well, the runoff was.
No, it wasn't. We had 1.1 million
I thought the
people
runoff.
show
I
up.
thought the runoff turnout was as big as the election turnout,
It
the
was-
primary turnout. But it's just that the percentages flipped, right? Because Cruz significantly outperformed
Without
Dewhurst.
question, yes. We had right at 1.4 on May 29th, and we had a little over 1.1.
Can I ask you a question, Jason, just
Yes.
while we're on the subject, that the press has always assumed, had the redistricting not thrown the primary schedule off the rails, and had the primary been back in March as opposed to May, many people in the press assume that Dewhurst still would have won.
Well,
What do you think about that?
I think that it would have certainly been a much higher hurdle, which is insane because the hurdle was
Already
at the
pretty
ceiling
high,
to begin
right,
with. But the benefit of time in a state the size of Texas allowed, now Senator-elect, I'm still getting used to
Yeah.
that, to travel and go out and meet folks. And so I think it certainly helped. But because listen, if what I'm hearing today, and I was on one of these panels yesterday morning, and I've heard on the talk shows, if these are the talking points and it's a narrative, I want to embrace it. If it is extreme, if it's extreme and it's conservative, for candidates to articulate that we can't spend money we don't have, I'll take it.
You'll take that definition.
I'll take it. We had this whole discussion about what will happen in the Texas legislative session as if the fiscal cliff is not on the horizon, and we have no clue how that's going to be dealt with, and act as if it's not going to impact our economy in the state of Texas, and it very well could. But back that you ask, is it the message or the messenger? I would suggest there is no issue with the message that has motivated people across this country, and there has been a big issue with the messengers.
Except in the races he brings up, that wasn't the message. In Murdoch, Engel,
Exactly.
O'Donnell,
And-
it wasn't a fiscal message.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's my
so
point.
in that case, it was the messenger.
And that's not
and
the
the
Tea
message,
Party.
for that matter.
And that's not the Tea Party, which is something.
Ain't Sharon Engel and Christine O'Donnell were the Tea Party?
If
Absolutely the Tea Party.
I know that benefits you to put that label on, just like yesterday in Houston, I heard an establishment business person who led with the question of, when will the Tea Party get off of social issues? That's what defines the Tea Party. Well, first of all, I'll never abandon my personal social faith and values and principles, but in a year and a half on the Ted Cruz campaign, I cannot recall a single conversation I had with legitimate Tea Party local activists and leaders across the state of Texas that involved anything but fiscal issues. That's what defines, and if you want to call it Tea Party, fine, but it's a movement across this country because we are legitimately dealing with some serious fiscal issues in this country. And we can't decide how to solve it. And Carolyn, maybe you win the day. Maybe it's more revenue. But we need to have the debate. And we can't have the debate, and I think this goes to the governor's budget compact, until we're honest about the actual challenges that we have before us.
Woman here in the front and then gentleman in the back, and I think that's going to have to be it.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts about women voters. You talked about Latinos, and thank you for that. But what was the impact of women voters? I know it played something at the federal election, and it was mentioned before, some of the, ridiculous rape comments that were made. But at the state level, with cuts to women's health program and the
Right.
sonogram bill, I'm just curious to know if that made an impact in elections.
Right, you had Cecile Richards of Planned Parenthood robo-calling for Wendy Davis on Election Day. Obviously in that race at least, women's issues were first in the forefront. But to what degree did women's issues permeate the conversation in Texas, forgetting the national conversation for a second?
Shouldn't we allow Carolyn to go first?
Well, my personal concentration was on candidates who were speaking for public education. And so many parents, and women particularly, are the people who were leaders of the PTA and saw firsthand teacher layoffs and cuts in budgets, and we had many pretty angry moms out working in campaigns, people who were angry about too much testing of their children in the public schools. So I do think, particularly in some key spots, you know, it was extremely important to have a bunch of mad moms campaigning, knocking on doors, making calls, writing checks.
Ed, did the women's issues that the question is referring to resonate as much here as they did nationally?
I don't think they did, and I was a little surprised by it, though not completely. I think that the issue of choice is a delicate one in Texas, again, with Texas being a conservative place with a
Choice of the abortion
electorate.
as opposed to choice of the voucher sort. Well, I want to be sure we're talking about the right choice.
Right. We're talking about abortion,
Wow.
reproductive rights.
I think that was another manhole.
Yeah, just making sure.
But yeah, especially with the sonogram legislation coming up in the last session and that not really playing an issue in this last election, I thought it might come up more. Yeah, I think it definitely came up in other places. Indiana was one of them, Missouri, of course. But it's part of, when you look at what the voters that Mitt Romney won and Obama won, Mitt Romney won men. I think it was 55-45 or something to that extent. And it was flipped for Obama. He won women voters. And part of the Obama coalition, the Democratic coalition nationwide, is exactly what we touched on earlier. It largely falls along lines of Anglo voters and minorities. And where do women go with that? And I think that Anglo women in particular can really go both ways. And I think that the issue played in a lot of other states. I don't think it played in this one.
But I'm going to echo, I mean, particularly women over the age of 55. There's no question that, but at the top and many steps down the ladder, that Republicans have not only lost the argument with a lot of female voters, frankly, in many instances, they've not even made an argument. And the Democrats have done a very good job at using certain issues and exploiting them, frankly, politically. And that is an area where Republicans are without question, trending in the wrong direction.
Let me ask Mr. Franzen to be the last question.
Thank you. For the last two election cycles, 2010 and 2014, every Republican candidate, including dog catchers, ran against President Obama. This next election, 2010, 2012, in this next election, you won't have President Obama to run against. The fact is, in spite of what Carolyn says, there was not a debate about education and vouchers in the House races or in the Senate races. There were no real local debates unless it was a very tight race. So next election cycle, 2 years from now, there's no President Obama you can run against. You're going to have to talk about the issues. Do you think that's going to impact the election cycle next time?
We asked Jordan and Jason about that.
I'm probably going to be discussing President Obama for the rest of my life. I can't imagine that I'm going to forget that guy anytime soon, nor will the voters. So I don't know.
You don't see him becoming less of a factor
I
in the next
completely
election?
disagree. And as the Republicans have argued all these years later about the Reagan policies and why they were good, the Democrats he will be their Reagan, and it's something we will be debating.
The way the Democrats are continuing to run against George Bush, even though George Bush is no longer in office.
Yeah, that's correct.
Jason, you think that Obama goes away as a factor in the next cycle?
Well, as a political point or a political punching bag, just as you mentioned, former President George W. Bush, I'm sure that will exist. But I think what his question goes to is, frankly, the foundation of pretty much everything I've said from the beginning. It's what has motivated the Tea Party. Will people run against President Obama? No, he can't run again. But he is right. We have to have an actual debate about the challenges that we face at the state and the federal level. And when I say actual debate, I hear y'all had one this morning. But my definition with the senators, my definition of that is, let's lay it out on the table. And if I'm going to argue that the way to solve this problem, this budget problem, is spending cuts, and you're going to argue it's tax increases or revenue increases. How can either of us argue on it if we don't even really know what the budget picture is? For example, in the state of Texas. And at the federal level, similar issues. And I truly believe that there's going to continue to be a dose of purity in a very different way in politics go forward. And unfortunately, the reason is because we are at a point in time where politicians on both sides, to borrow Ted's line, but it's a fact, have let issues go so long that we can't put off the impact of these kick the can down the road decisions anymore. And those who govern, those who win the argument on their policy option, are going to be rewarded politically at the ballot box, whether they be Democrat or Republican. Go for it.
Ed, last word.
And I agree with Jason. He's right. We do need to talk about issues. The problem is that we live in a Facebook status update, GChat, Twitter world where people consume bits of information in 140 characters or less. We are out of the realm where people weigh evidence in their decisions and emotions affect their decisions, which is why people like us a lot of times our candidates default to emotional issues. And it makes it difficult, as much as we would love to go out and talk about the budget or education, when a voter is just not responding. And in that case, you come up with something to get their attention and get their vote. It's not always the most admirable way, but it sometimes is the most effective.
And that's my point. The impact of what we're not doing is going to do the job for us of getting their attention. And the folks we work for are going to be forced to talk about it. And that's the lesson. I hear you. I mean, clearly the Ted Cruz campaign used social media. We love it. The takeaway for me, though, is, and I mean this, my belief in the system and a voter's ability to educate themselves against all odds was reinvigorated after the Ted Cruz campaign, because I saw people do exactly what, you're right, traditionally voters have been asleep, and the apathy is what led us to this point, and I think it's changing.
Well, let's hope it does.
We're going to leave it there. We got to let you all go and get some lunch and then come back at 1 o'clock. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Jordan Berry, Carolyn Boyle, Ed Espinosa, and Jason Johnson. Thank you.